For centuries, a powerful idea dominated the minds of empire builders. From the 18th to the 19th century, European and American powers held a firm belief: no coastal indigenous society could stand against the might of a modern military. They were convinced that their iron ships, deafening cannons, and disciplined soldiers would inevitably crush any resistance. It was a formula that seemed foolproof. Russian colonial officers, and later, American military planners, operated on this assumption. They believed that once faced with artillery and permanent forts, native resistance would simply crumble. Imperial doctrine was clear: control the seas, and you control the coast. They also thought that making native communities dependent on trade would break their political will. This wasn't just a theory. It was a strategy that had worked time and time again across the vast Pacific. It seemed like an unbreakable law of conquest. But in 1804, in a remote corner of the world, this belief was about to be shattered. Imagine arriving in southeast Alaska. It's a landscape where towering, snow-capped mountains plunge directly into the sea, where dense, ancient forests crowd the shoreline, and the water weaves through countless islands and inlets. The lines between land and sea are blurred, indistinct. Here, you quickly understand that this is not ordinary terrain. Every single shoreline is a potential battlefield. Every narrow inlet could become a deadly trap for an unsuspecting fleet. This is the land of the Tlingit people, and it is a fortress built by nature itself. In this world, we meet a man named K'Alion. He's a Tlingit leader in his 30s, a member of the prestigious Kix, Ordi clan, whose ancestral territory is centered around what is now known as Sitka Sound. His authority doesn't come from flashy charisma or loud speeches. It's forged from something deeper: his lineage, his unwavering discipline, and the long record of sound judgment that has earned him the respect of his people. What truly sets K'Alion apart is his perspective. While the invaders think in terms of immediate gains and quarterly profits, K'Alion thinks in generations. He sees the world not as a series of isolated moments, but as a continuous story stretching from his ancestors into the distant future. He understands that the decisions made today will echo for centuries. This long-term vision is a strategic advantage the Russians completely fail to comprehend. The Tlingit world is not one of decentralized, disorganized tribes, as the colonizers assume. It's a highly structured society governed by ancient clan laws, strict personal discipline, and a powerful sense of collective responsibility. Every individual understands their role and their duty to the clan. This social cohesion is their greatest strength. When the Russians arrived, K'Alion and his people saw them not just as a threat to their land, but as a danger to their entire way of life. The Russian expansion threatened their social order, their vital trade routes, and, most importantly, their ancestral honor. Now, let's look at the other side. The Russian-American company wasn't just a casual enterprise. Their presence in Alaska was a serious imperial project. Their survival depended entirely on two things: the immense profits from the sea otter fur trade and the establishment of permanent, fortified settlements to protect those profits. The jewel in their crown, the center of their entire operation, was Sitka. For the Russians, controlling Sitka meant controlling the fur trade and asserting their dominance over the entire northern Pacific coast. It was the key to their colonial ambitions. So, the stage is set for a monumental confrontation. On one side, you have the Russian Empire, armed with cannons, ships, and a belief in their own invincibility. On the other, you have K'Alion and the Tlingit, armed with an intimate knowledge of the land, a deeply unified society, and a leader who thinks in generations. This wasn't just another colonial skirmish. This was a battle for the future of the entire region. The question was, how could a people armed with traditional weapons possibly stand against an empire that arrived by sea with cannons? K'Alion knew a direct, open-field battle against Russian cannons would be suicide. His strategy had to be different. It had to be smarter. He began by uniting the clans, a difficult political task that required immense diplomacy and trust. He convinced different Tlingit houses to set aside their rivalries and face the common enemy together. Their plan was audacious. They would not wait for the Russians to attack. They would strike first. In 1802, in a brilliantly coordinated surprise attack, Tlingit warriors overwhelmed the Russian settlement at Sitka, known as Redoubt St. Michael. They completely destroyed the fort, driving the Russians out of their most important stronghold. This victory sent shockwaves through the colonial world. It was a stunning refutation of the idea that native resistance was futile. The Tlingit had proven that they were not a people to be trifled with. But Kay Alion knew the Russians would return, and they would return with overwhelming force. He had 2 years to prepare for the inevitable counterattack. This is where his genius for strategy truly shines. Instead of rebuilding on the old Russian site, he chose a new location. He directed his people to build a formidable new fort, known as Shiskinuo, or the Fort of the Young Saplings. It was located at a strategic point at the mouth of the Indian River, chosen for its defensive advantages. This was no simple wooden palisade. Shiskinuo was an engineering marvel, designed specifically to counter European artillery. The walls were incredibly thick, constructed from layers of massive logs and reinforced with earth and gravel. The design was angled to deflect cannonballs rather than absorb their full impact. It was equipped with firing platforms and strategic openings for Tlingit sharpshooters. Inside, the fort was stocked with enough food, water, and dried salmon to withstand a long siege. Kay Alion was preparing for a war of attrition, turning the Russians' expectation of a quick victory against them. He was transforming the landscape into an ally. In September 1804, the Russians returned, just as Kay Alion had predicted. The commander, Alexander Voronev, arrived with a fleet of warships, including the powerful Neva. He brought hundreds of Russian and Aleut fighters, armed with muskets and, most importantly, heavy cannons. Voronev was confident. He had overwhelming firepower and imperial doctrine on his side. He demanded the Tlingit surrender immediately. Kay Alion refused. The Battle of Sitka began. The Russian warships unleashed a furious bombardment on Shiskinuo. 4 days, cannonballs rained down on the fort, but Kay Alion's design held. The thick, angled walls absorbed or deflected the cannon fire. While the noise was terrifying and the fort sustained damage, it did not collapse. The Tlingit warriors inside, protected by their fortress, held their ground with incredible discipline, returning fire with precision and inflicting casualties on the attackers who dared to approach. The Russians were stunned. Their most powerful weapon, the naval cannon, was proving ineffective. The swift, decisive victory they had anticipated was turning into a frustrating and costly siege. Baranov's men were running low on ammunition and supplies. The morale of his Aleut allies, who had been forced into service, was plummeting. The tables had turned. The mighty Russian force was being worn down by the resilience and strategic brilliance of the Tlingit defense. Despite their heroic stand, the Tlingit faced a critical problem. They were running out of gunpowder. After several days of intense fighting, Kay Alion made a difficult but strategically brilliant decision. A victory where his people were annihilated was no victory at all. His goal was long-term survival, not a single, glorious last stand. Under the cover of darkness and a thick coastal fog, he organized a silent, orderly withdrawal from the fort. The Tlingit warriors, along with their families, melted back into the vast, forested landscape that they knew so well. It was a strategic retreat, not a surrender. When the Russians finally stormed the fort the next day, they found it empty. They had captured a hollow prize. Voronev declared victory and established the new Russian capital of New Archangel on the site, which would later become modern-day Sitka. But it was a fragile victory. He had not broken the Tlingit, he had merely pushed them back. The Tlingit, under Kay Alion's leadership, initiated a new phase of the conflict, a decade-long guerrilla war. They used their knowledge of the terrain to harass Russian supply lines, ambush hunting parties, and enforce a blockade that nearly starved the new colony. The conflict only ended when the Russians, realizing they could not win through force, were compelled to negotiate a peace that respected Tlingit autonomy and trade rights. Alyan's stand had fundamentally changed the balance of power. He proved that an indigenous nation, through strategic thinking, unity, and a deep understanding of their own environment, could successfully resist a major imperial power. The story of Alyan and the Battle of Sitka shattered the myth of inevitable colonial conquest. It is a powerful testament to the idea that true strength comes not just from cannons and ships, but from resilience, intelligence, and the unwavering will to protect one's home and heritage for generations to come. Imagine you're standing on the misty shores of what we now call Sitka, Alaska. The year is 1804. Out in the Sound, the silhouettes of Russian ships cut through the fog, their masts like a skeletal forest against the grey sky. They've dropped anchor, and you can see soldiers and heavy artillery on their decks, ready to come ashore. This isn't a trading mission, it's an invasion. But as you look along the shoreline, something incredible rises to meet this threat. It's the Tlingit fort, Shiskinu, which translates to the Fort of Young Spruce. And let me tell you, this is no simple wooden palisade. This is a marvel of military engineering. Its walls are made from thick, sturdy timbers, deeply embedded in the earth. But what's truly genius is their design. They're angled, built to deflect cannonballs, not just absorb them head-on. You can see layered barricades inside, creating a complex, multi-tiered defense system with carefully planned firing positions. This fort isn't symbolic, it's a machine built for war. Designed with a sophisticated understanding of ballistics and siege tactics, you see a commanding figure moving with purpose among the defenders. This is Alyan, one of the Tlingit war leaders. He's positioning his warriors, a force armed with a mix of modern muskets and traditional bows and spears. They take their places behind the layered defenses, their faces set with determination. They are not just waiting for an attack, they are preparing to meet it on their terms, from a position of strength they built with their own hands. The air is thick with anticipation, the salty tang of the sea mixed with the scent of spruce and the tension of impending battle. The Russians have their ships and cannons, but the Tlingit have Shiskinu, their land, and a brilliant strategy. Suddenly, a deafening roar shatters the quiet. The Russian cannons have opened fire. A plume of white smoke billows from the side of a ship, and a moment later, the ground beneath your feet trembles as a cannonball smashes into the earth nearby. The bombardment has begun. You can feel the vibrations traveling not just through the ground, but through the water, a deep, unsettling thrum that seems to shake your very bones. Another cannon fires, and this time the shot strikes the fort. But instead of the shattering explosion of splintered wood you might expect, the cannonball ricochets off the angled wall, skittering away harmlessly into the forest. The Russian gunners adjust their aim and fire again, and again. The fort endures a relentless pounding. Shot after shot slams into the timber walls, but they hold. Shiskinu seems to absorb the punishment, the angled design proving its worth with every deflected blow. It's an incredible sight, a testament to Tlingit ingenuity against the brute force of European artillery. The fort that was built for this very purpose is performing exactly as intended. A shield of wood and earth against iron and gunpowder, under the cover of their cannon fire. The Russians begin their ground assault. Longboats filled with infantrymen push off from the warships, rowing hard for the beach. They expect to storm a weakened, demoralized defense. They couldn't be more wrong. As the boats near the shore, musket fire erupts from the fort. But the attackers are bewildered. They can't pinpoint where the shots are coming from. The Tlingit warriors are masters of concealment, firing from carefully prepared, hidden positions within the fort's complex structure. The Russian soldiers, exposed in their open boats, fall into confusion. The first wave of attackers scrambles onto the beach, trying to form a line, but they are met with a continuous, accurate volley of fire. The echoes of the muskets seem to come from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the trees, from the very air itself. This is another part of Kalyon's strategy. His warriors are not static defenders, they are fluid, repositioning unseen through a network of trenches and protected pathways. They fire, melt back into the shadows of the forest, and reappear in a new location, creating the illusion of a much larger force and sowing chaos among the invaders. The Russians can't find a clear target. They are fighting ghosts. Hours crawl by. The sun arcs across the sky, but the situation remains a stalemate. The Russians control the water, their cannons continuing their barrage, but they cannot gain a foothold on the land. Every attempt to advance is repulsed. The Tlingit warriors, though outnumbered and outgunned in terms of heavy artillery, are fighting a smarter war. They are using the landscape and their fortress as extensions of their own will. The tension is palpable. The constant thunder of cannons, the crack of muskets, the shouts of men, it all blends into a grim symphony of conflict. For the Russians, frustration is mounting. For the Tlingit, every passing hour is a small victory, but it comes at a cost. But as day turns into evening, a new reality begins to set in for the defenders inside Chisinau. The initial advantage of their superior tactics is being worn down by a simple, brutal truth: attrition. Their supply of gunpowder and shot is dwindling. The relentless bombardment, while not destroying the fort, is taking a physical and psychological toll. How much longer can they hold out? They have proven their point, demonstrated their strength and their unwillingness to be conquered. But a desperate last stand, fighting to the last man, would be a tragic, Pyrrhic victory at best. It would mean the loss of their best warriors, the heart of their community. This is the moment where true leadership is tested, and Kalyan makes a decision that is as brilliant as the fort's design itself. He recognizes that survival is the ultimate victory. He chooses not a blaze of glory, but the preservation of his people. He gives the order to withdraw. But this is not a panic retreat. It is a disciplined, strategic withdrawal, executed with the same precision as their defense. Under the cover of darkness and the dense coastal rainforest, the Tlingit warriors and their families slip away from the fort. They abandon the physical structure, but they take their community, their culture, and their fighting spirit with them. When the sun rises the next morning, an eerie silence hangs over the sound. The Russian cannons are quiet. Cautiously, the soldiers advance on the fort, expecting a final, bloody confrontation. Instead, they find it empty. Chisinau stands intact, a silent monument to the resistance it housed. The Tlingit have vanished, melting into the vast, rugged terrain of their homeland, a landscape the Russians cannot navigate and dare not pursue them into. In the end, the Russians claimed the ground. They raised their flag over the empty fort and established the settlements that would become Sitka. They won the battle in the traditional European sense. But they had not conquered the Tlingit. By choosing a strategic withdrawal over a suicidal last stand, Kalyan ensured his people's survival. They remained a sovereign power in the region for years to come, a constant presence just beyond the tree line. The Battle of Sitka wasn't just a story of a fort, it was a story of resilience, of a people who understood that a nation is not a piece of land or a wooden wall, but the people themselves, and those people had not been defeated, they had simply moved the battle to a new front, one where they held all the advantages. Please consider liking the video and subscribing for more stories that challenge the narratives we think we know. As we zoom out from the smoke and fury of the 1804 battle, the long-term consequences begin to ripple across the decades, like the wake of a great canoe. We see a future that Voronezh, for all his ambition, could not have foreseen. Russian America, the empire's foothold in the New World, never truly becomes the dominant force he envisioned. Instead, it remains a fragile, expensive, and perpetually dependent enterprise. The colonies constantly stretch thin, reliant on supply lines that stretch thousands of miles across the unforgiving Pacific. It's a project that is always teetering on the edge of failure, haunted by the very resistance that it tried so brutally to crush. The Kicks, Ordy's defiance, didn't just win them a moral victory. It fundamentally altered the strategic calculus of Russian colonialism in North America. They had exposed the limits of imperial power. Years later, after the United States purchases Alaska from a weary Russia in 1867, American officials step into the same complicated reality. They inherit not just the land, but the very same problem that had plagued the Russians for over half a century. They find that the Tlingit are not a conquered people ready to be assimilated. Instead, they are a sovereign nation with a deep, unbreakable connection to their homeland, a sophisticated social structure, and a memory that is long and sharp. The Americans arrive with their own set of assumptions about manifest destiny and military superiority, believing they can succeed where the Russians had failed. They quickly learn, however, that the Tlingit landscape is not just a physical territory to be mapped and controlled, but a cultural and spiritual one that fiercely resists foreign domination. The challenges faced by the Russian-American company are simply passed down, a difficult inheritance for the new landlords of Alaska. The U.S. military, confident in its own power, initially tries to impose its will through force, just as the Russians had. Forts are built, gunboats patrol the waters, and a heavy-handed military presence attempts to pacify the region. But they soon discover a truth that Broniff had learned the hard way. Military force alone cannot subdue Tlingit territory. Every act of aggression is met with calculated resistance. The Tlingit people prove to be masterful strategists and diplomats, using a combination of armed defiance, economic pressure, and legal challenges to assert their sovereignty. They understand the terrain, both physical and political, far better than the newcomers. The Americans find that their forts are isolated islands in a Tlingit sea, their control extending only as far as the range of their cannons. They are governing a territory they do not truly command, and the cost of maintaining this illusion of control, both in resources and in lives, begins to mount. This relentless and intelligent resistance forces a critical shift in American policy. The initial doctrine of military subjugation slowly, grudgingly, gives way to a new approach. U.S. officials begin to understand that negotiation, diplomacy, and a degree of restraint are not signs of weakness, but necessities for survival and governance in this complex part of the world. The Tlingit had taught the Russians, and now they were teaching the Americans, a vital lesson. Power is not just about firepower. It's about resilience, cultural strength, and an unwavering will to defend one's home. The American strategy has to evolve from one of conquest to one of coexistence, however unequal and fraught with tension that coexistence might be. This change wasn't born from benevolence, but from the hard-won respect that the Kicks, Ordy, and other Tlingit clans had earned through their disciplined and unyielding stand. Their resistance literally reshaped the policies of two empires. As we bring our focus back from the grand stage of geopolitics, we return to the human cost of this struggle. We remember the faces of the Tlingit warriors, the men and women who stood on that palisade wall, who fought to defend their homes, their families, and their way of life. History, as it is often written by the victors, has a tendency to forget them. Their names are not carved into grand monuments, and their deeds are often relegated to footnotes in the conqueror's narratives. But their bravery was no less real, their sacrifice no less profound. They were patriots defending their homeland from foreign invasion, fighting with a courage that deserves to be remembered and honored. These were not faceless savages, as their enemies portrayed them, but disciplined soldiers, loving parents, and proud members of a rich and ancient culture. who made the ultimate sacrifice for their people. And what became of the raven-hatted warrior, Caerleon, the man who led the Kicks, Odi, with such skill and discipline? History tells us that he survived the battle and the difficult years that followed. He lived to see the Russians struggle to maintain their grip on Sitka, and he remained a respected and influential leader among his people. He didn't just fade into obscurity, he became a powerful symbol. Caerleon represents not just fierce opposition, but disciplined, strategic resistance. He embodies the idea that a warrior's greatest strength isn't just ferocity in battle, but also the wisdom to know when to fight, when to withdraw, and how to endure. His legacy is one of resilience, a testament to the Tlingit spirit that could bend under immense pressure, but would never break. He stands as a quiet rebuke to the arrogant belief that a bigger army always wins. So why does this story, from a foggy corner of the world over to centuries ago, still matter so much today? It matters because it forcefully challenges one of our most persistent and dangerous myths, the myth of technological determinism. We are often taught that history is a simple story of progress, where the side with the better guns, the bigger ships, and the more advanced technology inevitably triumphs. The story of the Kicks, Odi, and the Battle of Sitka shows us that this is a lie. It proves that human factors, courage, unity, strategic thinking, and an unbreakable will can stand against overwhelming technological superiority. It reminds us that history isn't just decided by weapons, but by the spirit of the people who wield them or who stand against them. This is a story of human agency, a powerful reminder that people are never just passive victims of historical forces. They make choices, they resist, and their actions have the power to shape the future. As this story concludes, a sense of responsibility settles upon us. We become the keepers of this memory. The history of Caerleon and the Kicks, Odi warriors, is not just a fascinating tale from the past. It is a living legacy that has been passed down to us. It falls to us to ensure that their sacrifice is not forgotten, that their courage is not erased from the pages of history. By learning and sharing this story, we participate in the act of remembrance. We push back against the narratives that would silence them, and we honor the enduring strength of the Tlingit people. We take on the duty of carrying their fire forward, ensuring that the lessons of their struggle continue to inspire and instruct future generations. This is more than just history. It's a sacred trust. If this story moved you, please click the like button. Your support helps us keep this vital history alive and share it with the world. We are dedicated to rescuing these forgotten stories from the archives, and we invite you to subscribe and join our community of history lovers. In the comments below, please tell us where you're watching from, and if you or someone in your family has served in any capacity, we would be honored if you shared that with us. Thank you for watching, and thank you for ensuring that Caerleon and the warriors of the Kicks, Odi, are remembered, because history only survives when we choose to remember it.